Boards for Australia's biggest ASX-listed companies are preparing for a rush of class action claims. Now, insurance premiums covering directors have surged by 171% in just the last year. And the cost to insure an Australian director is currently on par with a director of a major US company. Let's bring in Peter's economic panel of wisdom right now. Tonight, joining me from Melbourne is the Herald Sun's Terry McCrann, and in Sydney, the Australian's economic editor, Adam Crichton. Gents, welcome. Good to have you with us. Terry, can I ask you firstly, why will we see huge payouts against directors as a result of the pandemic? I don't get this increase.
I think we'll certainly see a huge increase in the claims. Quite how that will translate to payouts, we'll have to wait and see on that. But the bottom line is that any time that this plethora of people we have out there that seek to exploit the class action process see an opportunity, and obviously an opportunity in the virus context occurs on any number of levels. The virus itself, the way companies have reacted to it, both in terms of their personal employee situations, their customer relationships, and their basic business profiles. So companies are at risk of being attacked. Quite where this will lead, we'll have to wait and see.
It's incredible opportunism. Adam, ASX-listed litigation funder Omni Bridgeway recently said it was funding some 31 class actions. Are we at risk of becoming a nation of litigators obsessed with torts like in the United States?
Well, I think that's already happened, Chris. I think if you look at the per capita figures, I think New South Wales is essentially the defamation and the litigation capital of the world now, and this is just one manifestation of that. I think a broader point of all of this, the premiums and the payouts, the cost to companies, is that ultimately they're going to be borne by the customers of the businesses and also the shareholders. So Parliament can pass all these laws to impose various obligations, which of course in turn are taken advantage of by various law firms. But ultimately the cost is lumped with the customers and the shareholders, and it doesn't necessarily change behaviour, but it certainly adds to the cost of doing business greatly.
Yeah, Chris, if I could add, the only winners out of this process are the lawyers and the litigant funders and the exploiters. I mean, at the end of the day, they walk away with the dollars. As Adam said, the customers, the shareholders, and the community pay more.
Yeah, us mugs have to pay for the product or pay for the service and facility much more than what we do now. Now, a study released by Transurban says 86% of people working from home believe they'll be back in the office once the pandemic ends. Adam, this is challenging the belief, and from what I've heard from a lot of employers, that coronavirus has tipped us to a different edge. That is, a lot more people will be working from home and CBDs will be empty. I know at the moment, I think the figure was there's a 10 to 15% vacancy rate in commercial property in Sydney at least. So where do you think this will go?
I'm surprised it's not higher than that, actually. Look, it certainly is popular to say that the world is never going to be the same again. I think after every crisis, people tend to say that. I mean, I'm more in the camp that I think in 12 months to 2 years, things will gradually start to look like they used to. And frankly, it's probably in Australian workers' interest that they do, because the longer that people are working from home, I think the greater inclination on the part of business to basically reduce their pay, because frankly they can't monitor their staff if they're at home. They don't know what they're doing. It's much harder to monitor productivity, and also they're more likely to outsource the jobs to overseas. I mean, if you're not in the office, what's the point in necessarily having an Australian do the job? Much of this work could be done in other English-speaking countries where there are lower wages. So I think it's probably in the interest of office workers, I would say, as much as they might enjoy being at home, to get back in the office.
Having said all of that, I remember speaking on my other program on Sky News, Terry, to a couple of employers who actually told me that they have seen a higher rate of productivity from people like telephone call screen answerers, more than they had when they were together in a premises in the middle of the city.
Chris, I think it's going to be horses for courses, that in some businesses, some job functions, working from home or in remote locations more generally, it doesn't have to be specifically in the home, might become appealing. And, obviously lower rentals in regional context. But I agree with Adam that I think generally the people will go back to working in offices. But I think what we will see is lower numbers and potentially lower pay. So that I think in the long run, this is not going to be good for the average employee. And obviously, things like retail businesses, if they survive, will require staff in their retail premises, whether it's a shop or a restaurant or a cafe.
Yeah, these are the
Just on that point, Terry. I was just going to say on that point, we saw in the wage figures that came out today that actually the biggest drops in wages were amongst the white-collar jobs, the professional classes. So I thought that was an interesting harbinger of what might be ahead.
Yeah, it's happening already. It's an entree to what's ahead. Now, Queensland businessman Clive Palmer, who can't keep out of the news, says he'll be taking the WA government to the High Court if legislation terminating his $30 billion legal claim over plans to sell a proposed new iron ore mine passes. Terry, $30 billion is a lot of money for any state. The pollies are worried. Does that mean he's got a case?
Let me make 2 points, big points, sir. I think what the Western Australian government is doing is utterly outrageous, passing a law to basically steal money from a single person. I mean, they are basically saying we are going to steal the property right that Clive Palmer has because we think he's going to win his case. On the other hand, it's not going to be anywhere near $30 billion. If Clive Palmer won on every point, the way project valuations in the real world are done, in present value terms, the figure would be much, much lower than that. So the WA government's really only at risk in the worst possible outcome for something probably up to $5-6 billion.
Right. However, you've got his High Court challenge over the borders. This could be a win-win for Clive Palmer, Adam.
Yes, look, it could be, although I'd just like to reiterate Terry's point. I think it's unusual that the West Australian government seeking to legislate in advance of the court decision. It seems too arbitrary and specific, and surely a court would never have awarded such an enormous amount anyway. So, and of course, the Parliament always had the option of legislating after the fact if it wanted to, if it was so dreadful. But yeah, look, I just on the border issue, I don't understand why this is taking so long to be resolved. It seems an extraordinarily pressing thing for the country for these, for there to be clarity on this, and yet there's no court decision yet, at least to my knowledge.
It should be expedited in these terms, I would have thought. Now, ASIC is warning the government's early access superannuation scheme is a ready target for organised crime gangs. The Commission has revealed it's been contacted by the ATO and the AFP over suspicious activity. Terry, don't tell me we've invented something on the back of a coaster again without proper due diligence.
Well, I'm glad that we are focusing on the potential for people to be ripped off and for less salubrious members of the society, as opposed to the people that up to date have got their fingers in the superannuation pie, fund managers and the like. Less salubrious members of the want to target the same pile of money. But I'd want to see some real evidence that organised crime gangs are actually getting the money before I would be too concerned about it.
Yeah, I would have thought the same. Adam, just on that point, have you been surprised at the number of Australians who've accessed their super? And given the numbers we've got now, what does it tell us about your average Australian?
Yeah, look, I certainly have been surprised, and pleasantly surprised, I would say. I think we're almost up to 3 million individuals now have accessed this, and of course the Treasury, as you know, forecasts $42 billion in total will have been withdrawn by the end of the year. So I think that's, this is people accessing and engaging with their own money. I think that's a good thing. I think, the superannuation sector actually has complained for years about a lack of engagement with superannuation. Well, this is the best engagement of all, people actually getting their money. So they should be thrilled with the outcome.
But who's going to pay their bonuses and who's going to pay their mortgage on the boat, Adam?
Exactly. Well, look, it's probably not going to change it too much, given there's about $3 trillion in the sector still, and this is only $42 billion. So I think their bonuses will be safe. Yeah.
Terry McCrann, you've written today how Sydney Airport found itself in exactly the wrong place at the wrong time. Security holders have been asked to front up $2 billion after recording a $54 million loss after all the... I got to say, though, after all the fees and charges they hit at people like hire car drivers, etc., and parking at the airports, maybe there's a bit of karma coming their way.
Well, exactly. Schadenfreude, Chris. Again, this goes back to the question of life after the virus, assuming we ever do get to a state of life after the virus. Clearly, the number of airplane arrivals and therefore passenger arrivals at Sydney Airport are going to be a lot lower for a long time. I mean, we're not going to go back to the 9 million passengers a quarter that we were getting at the start of the year. So that what we thought was a licence to print money, like Transurban, there's a sort of a new brutal reality, and I'm quite happy to see that happening. And just to make a point on the superannuation, the fact that only 40 billion of the 3 trillion has gone out is pretty much a good news story indirectly about how badly people are suffering out there. They are suffering, but maybe not as badly as we might have thought.
That's a very good point. Adam and Terry, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Chris.